So thanks everyone for being here today and taking an interest in my topic. I hope you find it of some value. Before we start, I would very much like to take a moment to acknowledge those traditional owners of the land that we stand on, the ones in the past and the current and the future, the Kalkadoon people. Thank you very much for having me on your country. Hello, I'm seeing all these new faces. I've really enjoyed being here. I've only been here for 6 months, so I came out from Townsville. It's beautiful country. It really gets underneath your skin, so thank you very much for having me here. Today's presentation, I'm going to overview the common types of literacy, followed by a small activity to get you thinking about your own literacy levels, and then contrast them with the experience of a lot of people in Australia. I'm then going to introduce the service learning program here at the Centre for Rural and Remote Health, and the speech pathology students who are going to be placed at the Flexible Learning Centre here and doing the intervention. I'll also tie in the national and international targets with the Close the Gap campaign and the Sustainable Development Goals to bring it back home. So my background is as a speech pathology person with a love of the bush. I graduated from JCU in Townsville and I'm still a student there. I'm doing a Masters in Public Health. My position out here at the Centre for Rural and Remote Health is as a clinical educator to 5 amazing speech pathology students just down here. They're also from Townsville, which makes me wonder if I'm actually a little bit biased. As part of their 7-week placement here, they're going to be at the Flexible Learning Centre, also in this building here, which is the rehab unit. So just to have a think about what literacy is, look, most of us know, but it's really the ability to connect the things that you hear and speak about with the written and read text, but also to think critically about it. So just because somebody has basic spelling abilities, it doesn't actually mean that they can comprehend the word and then also its use. There's lots of different types of literacy. For the purpose of this presentation, we'll focus just on the reading and writing literacy, but everything ties in together. You know, we're holistic beings, so the emotional literacy, financial, computer, mental health, all of this all ties in together. But just for this, we'll focus on the reading and writing. So this little activity, just for a moment, I'd like you to consider the multiple and continual applications of literacy throughout your everyday life. In your mind's eye, think about what steps you took to arrive here at the conference. Registering for the event and completing the paperwork, did you have to ask anyone for that help? Or could you read all the words on the page and understand them? What about organising your travel by plane or car? How'd you go with that? Did you have to ask anyone for help? And following the signs to get here. Maybe think about what you ate last night. Did you order off a menu? Did you have any problems with that? Or maybe you followed a recipe. Or maybe you were lucky enough to recall the methodology of that recipe off by heart. And of course, the social use of media throughout this conference. Hopefully you're all using Attendify. So that's literacy in action right there. But unfortunately, this is not the same situation for every Australian. So in 2011-2012, the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, performed a survey called the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies. So this collected literacy and numeracy information on 15 to 74-year-olds throughout the world. This is Australia's data here. So level 3 is deemed as the national standard, termed the level of proficiency, the one circled. And this here is considered the minimum for coping with the demands of everyday life and work in our complex and advanced society. It denotes roughly the skill required for successful completion of secondary and tertiary education, and 43.7% of Australians haven't reached that level. So that's edging towards half of the Australian population who may not be able to read well enough to follow that recipe that you cooked, to enter personal information into documents with agencies such as Centrelink or the Post Office or licensing agencies, and alarmingly even understand the instructions on medication for their own medication or their partners or their child's or their grandchild's who they may be the primary carer for. So in other words, 7.3 million Australians have literacy skills low enough to make them vulnerable to unemployment and social exclusion. Of course, this can entrench cycles of disadvantage and not only exclude these people from the workplace generally, but from those emerging jobs that require a high level of literacy, particularly digital literacy. Here we have recent NAPLAN results for the percentage of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students in years 3, 5, 7 and 9 who were at or above the national minimum standard for reading. So that's at level 3 proficiency. Across the ages, the gap in percentage points between Indigenous and non-Indigenous students is between 23.5% and almost 30%. And here we have information on Indigenous children only who are at or above that minimum standard, that level 3 proficiency once again. And we can see, and we already know this, that a student's level of literacy proficiency decreases as the level of remoteness increases. And in fact, those achieving national minimum standards in remote Australia amount to only at most 30%. And of course, these figures can be extended to Mount Isa as well. And this brings us to the Flexible Learning Centre here. Flexi, as it is endearingly termed, is an arm of the Edmund Rice Australia Group and has a strong social justice perspective. In 2017, the 42 enrolments were all from young Indigenous kids who, for one reason or many, were unable to maintain attendance at a mainstream school. Most of the young people are not from Mount Isa and instead come from areas such as Lake Nash and Doomadgee and Mornington Island, and have either verified or non-verified disabilities such as hearing and learning impairments that further impact their engagement at school. And in many instances, these kids are cycling through that revolving door of the Department of Youth Justice, seeing lots of nodding heads. For those guests who are not familiar with the region, Lake Nash is to the west of here, Doomadgee to the north, and then Mornington Island, hop, skip and a jump into the Gulf of Carpentaria. So the Flexi School is quite different in how they go about things, and what makes them different besides the provision of breakfast, morning tea and lunch every day is the daily structure. So the first class starts at 10 a.m. They have a bus run to go and collect the kids. Starts at 10 a.m., finishes at 2 p.m. And it's also the attitudes of the teachers to accommodate the ever-changing needs of that young person. And the innovative adult-style learning that is flexible enough to take that classroom outside, even off school campus into the bush setting. So until the arrival of the Centre for Rural and Remote Health Service Learning Program, there was no allied health services that were engaging with the school in an ongoing fashion. They do have a lot of visiting services, but nothing speech pathology or OT ongoing. So from April to June this year, the service learning team positioned 2 speech pathology and 2 occupational therapy students as a trial run within the Flexi School. And these students worked incredibly hard despite the fact that they often felt that their efforts were going nowhere. We really encouraged them, it was making a difference. They were making inroads. They really worked hard to build rapport with the young people, and at the end they had some really game-changing moments, certainly on the students' end. And the teachers and support staff were really appreciative as well. So they spent 6 weeks there. And of course we gathered some feedback. We wanted the real stuff, so we sat them down and we spoke long and hard with them about that. And the feedback from the students' perspective was that it was an immense opportunity to work with disengaged youth beyond what they were taught at university in terms of the Aboriginal culture. It led them to advance their clinical skills in a non-traditional environment, which they were really challenged with all the way along, but we just had to keep reminding them, keep going, keep going. I'm sure they're still thinking about it to this day. It really challenged their values, and one of the students really questioned her own upbringing, and she said that she'd been wrapped in cotton wool, really blessed and wrapped in cotton wool. So I think that was probably it made a huge impact for her, I know it did. The teacher feedback that we got was that they advanced their own knowledge around what allied health can do for the young people at the school. They were really appreciative. They saw the benefit in fresh faces and fresh ideas, particularly of our young allied health students coming in and meeting the learning needs of these young people. And of course there was an added benefit of having more bodies in the room, because these young kids here, the young people, require a 2-to-1 person just to keep them engaged and on task. So Flexi have welcomed us back for term 3. Wonderful. And this time we have 5 amazing speech pathology students, which I am backing all the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're really, they're on board. So they're going to expand on the foundations from last term and continue to engage with the young people and challenge the young person's perception of learning, while advancing their literacy skills and by showing them real-world examples, real-world applications. So I've said to the girls, you can take them off campus, and we've got that permission from the school. You can take them off campus. You can take them out to Lake Mundara. You can take them out of class. Yeah. So they've got their work cut out for them, and I think learning is going to be a two-way thing. So just to zoom out a little bit more now and think about how important literacy is, it's certainly on the national agenda. The target for the Closing the Gap is to halve the gap for Indigenous children in reading, writing and numeracy by 2018. Probably no surprises there, it's not on track. And in fact, Northern Territory is not on track, and nor is Australia for any of those age groups, so nothing new there. Disappointing. On an international scale, it is still on the agenda. So it was part of the Millennium Development Goals, and the second goal there was to achieve universal primary education by 2015. That was narrowly missed. I don't know how narrow means, but it was narrowly missed, and it was subsequently absorbed into the Sustainable Development Goals. So goal number 4 there, quality education. However, it does tie into many of the other 17 Sustainable Development Goals, indicated with smaller circles, but let's face it, if you can't read and write well and integrate and work with your environment, then it's going to impact on a lot more than what is circled there. So the story of closing the literacy gap continues, and we've only just started to do our little bit here in Mount Isa. And we're going to persist, because that's what we do. So if you'd like to come back to the conference in 2 years' time, then maybe I'll be able to deliver a follow-up presentation on some even bigger successes at the Flexible Learning Centre. So thanks very much, guys, for your time. Hope you got something from it. Thanks.